Viewers, it's a very significant day today. It's a significant day because, viewers, an attempt was made, and the Supreme Court has underlined it. An attempt was made to divide Indian society, to take us back decades into a system, viewers, that we have left behind. Casteism in this society is on the wane, viewers. I'm only saying it because the statistics tell us this. And viewers, we've elected a government that has told us on numerous occasions that ek hai to safe hai. If we are together, we will swim together. But viewers, as you know, there is an attempt to undermine Indian unity. A lot of these attempts are made through the help of those who are aligned to forces that reside outside this country. The Soros gang and this, that, the other. You know, viewers, what I'm talking about. But one wouldn't have thought that a government committed to unification of society would become a victim of this massive conspiracy, viewers, to divide India. And therefore, tonight, I want to say that the Supreme Court's stay on the new UGC rules, these divisive rules, is a sharp reminder that unity cannot be an afterthought in governance. Especially, viewers, when it comes to education. Because what we learn in our classrooms informs our character for the rest of our lives. If the basics are twisted, are perverse, we will all come out, viewers, twisted and perverse. And therefore, viewers, the Supreme Court has not merely nitpicked language, it has questioned the direction of India's state policy. The court has to step in after the UGC came up with new anti-discrimination regulations that sought to fight discrimination by, guess what, viewers? Discrimination. At the heart of it was a clause that basically consigned upper caste to the status of perpetual oppressors and lower caste, OBCs, SCs, as perpetual victims. And this is the clause I'm talking about. In this particular policy, viewers, in the UGC rules against discrimination on campus, it said caste-based discrimination means discrimination only on the basis of caste or tribe against the members of the scheduled caste, scheduled tribes and other backward classes. Vague definitions, elastic terminology and open-ended discretion, the bench noted, are not administrative oversights. They are invitations to misuse and can impact unity of society. Why this should not have been apparent, viewers, to a nationalist government, why this woke agenda was not apparent to them is mystifying. But I'll look at that in just a few moments. This is what the Supreme Court said. Unity must be reflected in educational institutions. Regulations prima facie are vague, prone to misuse. Language used is vague. Experts need to clarify. Such issues may have dangerous impact and divide society. Until union redrafts norms, they're kept in abeyance. So Supreme Court has stayed this policy, viewers. The Supreme Court's language is telling. Unity must be reflected in educational institutions. Vague and prone to misuse. Dangerous impact. These are not glib observations. They beg some fundamental questions of the government and, viewers, the woke lobby that seems to be influencing its actions. The government might have failed, viewers, in spotting this, but the opposition that is supposed to hold the government to account has also, viewers, supported these UGC regulations, even though it is easily established that prima facie they are divisive. they can lead to massive civil tensions. Because even a parliamentary panel had red flagged these norms, asking for clarity, safeguards and transparency. Those warnings were brushed aside. The recommendations were, viewers, provide comprehensive lists of acts that count as discrimination, clarity over norms to avoid ambiguity and reduce risk of misuse, mandatory annual public disclosures of discrimination cases. But when protests broke out, the government came up with nothing more than some hollow assurances. Dharmendra Pradhan, Education Minister, said there will be no discrimination whatsoever, unquote. And he went on to add, no one can misuse UGC's anti-discrimination rules, won't allow anyone to misuse the law, unquote. Clearly, viewers, the Supreme Court wasn't convinced. The irony is hard to miss. A government that rose to power on the promise of national integration and civilizational confidence now finds itself defending regulations that risk institutionalizing suspicion, identity policing, and undermining social cohesion. Viewers, a woke grammar borrowed wholesale from Western campus politics has seeped into government policy in this country. And that too of a government sworn to defending the integrity of our nation. One can only hope it is a misstep. The Supreme Court has stated this, and we are expecting, viewers, the government to come back and say, okay, we're not challenging this, we accept, we're going to go back to our own regulations that we passed a year back, which were far more balanced. Viewers, let's ask some fundamental questions. Who's putting narrative above the nation? We have with us Dr. Ranganathan. We also have with us Monojit Mandal, political analyst. And we will have with us in just a few moments Rajat Sethi, political analyst. Now, Monojit Mandal, I have a whole list of opposition parties. Yes, the government messed up. The government must make amends. The government must. Tell us, why is it compromising on India's unity? What worries me is that even the opposition has abetted in this. What recourse do we have when the opposition that is supposed to check the government is agreeing with it? Only because you want to serve vote bank political interests. You want to keep OBCs, SCs and STs happy. You know that it doesn't really matter in the long run if a smaller percentage of the population loses its rights. Mr. Mondol, explain to me, sir.
This regulation are not only about SCs, STs and OBCs. These are also about the EWS, economically weaker sections, which are largely coming from the quote-unquote upper caste of the society, or the quote-unquote upper echelons of the society, is clearly mentioned. And I do not know, as that is the objective of the Act. Section 2 clearly mentions that. It also talks about the minorities. Why? Because for ages, since independence, we have seen how these people, the marginalized people, have been treated in the university campuses. I want to understand from the government and from especially from the office of the Prime Minister and the Education Minister of the country, please tell us how many of the vice chancellors in this country belong to SC, STs and OBC. Out of 700 odd universities, public universities, that include the central universities also, 150 central institutes.
And I'm asking
how many?
Professor
Not
Mondol.
even, hang on. And this is a debate.
The Supreme Court is asking these questions. Please appreciate. But you seem to be in favor of these UGC legislations.
Absolutely.
I can't understand.
I'll tell you why. And you have to bear with me
Yeah,
because
of course,
I'll get
sir,
personal.
please.
I'll get personal. I am a Dalit myself. I have suffered atrocities in the hands of my colleagues, including the administration. I had to file a case against SC/ST Atrocities Act, and that happened during the left front regime. I was driven out of the university for 3 years, and ultimately I could get justice from the Supreme Court. Though tragically I could not continue in the criminal case because of the intervention of the Advocate General, who was supposed to fight for me. he intervened and liquidated the whole case. And it so happens later on that I got cancer because of my struggle and I couldn't fight the case.
So social
And
justice must
that's
be
the
only
case.
a
But
one-way street,
hang
sir.
on. No, I'm not saying this. Hang on. This particular act, this came out in 1989. And Mr. Rahul Shivshankar, please check with the data and statistics. How many cases are finding conviction under Atrocities Act? Barely 0.5%. Does it mean that atrocities are not happening as STs? It's happening. It's happening rampantly in the campuses. For the first time, we are lauding this kind of regulation. And even before the implementation of it, there was a hue and cry that this will be misused. Even before the implementation
The fix can't be.
that itself, that is
The fix can't be worse than the malady, sir.
Caste intent.
The fix can't be worse than the malady.
Intent.
The fix can't be worse than the malady. The cure can't be worse than the malady. You can't swing from one direction to the other.
I'm appalled that even before the implementation, this act is being presupposed as a caste legislation.
You see, I don't blame the opposition for standing up for something that has been dictated chapter and verse in Brown University.
Yes, they're right.
I have no compunctions about telling you, viewers, that the opposition in this country, unfortunately, is allying with forces that don't want to see social cohesion. And this proves it. The Supreme Court itself is saying this is divisive. Please, rethink. Dr. Ranganathan, are we wrong? What's going on?
Good evening. Just one sentence would completely, contradict whatever my very good friend, Mr. Mondal has said. Would he be fine if the UAPA Act or law were to define the victims of terrorism as only Hindus, exclude Muslims? Would he be fine with that? No, they would burn the country down. So anyway, look, I welcome the Supreme Court stay on the UGC equity regulations, Rahul. And first of all, I'd like to thank the amazing people who petitioned the Supreme Court to get this verdict. Sanjay Dikshit, Rahul Diwan, Vishnu Jain, and of course, so many others who over the past week have kept the flame of free speech and dissent on this issue burning. Notable among them, Ajit Bharti, Jesai Deepak, and Anuradha. These are the people who represented a billion of us today. When those who were elected to represent a billion of us were hiding somewhere, fearful of fighting injustice. So much for democracy and representation. But as I had explained to you earlier, Rahul, the UGC equity regulations were unjust and they must be revised because, number one, caste discrimination victim definition excludes general category. Number two, equity committee composition excludes mention of general category. And number three, there is no provision for punishing false complaints. So while I welcome the Supreme Court stay, I humbly disagree with the Supreme Court when it labels the offending clause as vague. I'm sorry, there was nothing vague about the way in which the clause defines who are going to be the victims of caste discrimination. The general category are spitefully, speciously, perhaps deliberately kept out of this ambit. Rahul, any law must ensure that it gives justice to everyone, not just to a few. Yes, there is discrimination, of course there is. Yes, there is injustice. But a law that counters them should not be discriminatory, should not be unjust. And when the education minister under whose tutelage these laws were promulgated assured us a couple of days ago that this law will not be misused, he was right. Because a good law can be misused, but you cannot misuse a bad law. You can only use it, and vested interests are going to use this bad law for their ulterior motives. Already, some spokespersons and activists were advocating slapping fake complaints on general category students to trap them. And as for Indra Jaisingh's deranged statements of today, remember the tens of thousands of fake cases filed using the SC/ST Act? Remember Pooja Rawat, now in jail for slapping 29 fake cases using SC/ST Act, including rape, and the new UGC equity regulations would have perpetuated the same. Look, Rahul, I am for such a law, I am. And I don't believe it is needless to bring it because the cases are so few. Laws must not be made on the basis of victim numbers. Even one case of injustice merits bringing in a law. But as Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. It is necessary to correct injustice, of course it is. But it cannot be corrected by reapplying it. Punishing innocent people for sins they did not themselves commit is not correcting injustice. It is continuing it in its most violent and retributive form. Just 30 seconds. UGC equity laws are an injustice happening on campuses, which will become a threat to justice happening in the country if they are not repealed. I repeat, make this law caste and community agnostic, so that any community member facing caste discrimination can use it, any community member versed with caste discrimination can adjudicate it, and any community member misusing it can face punitive action. Just make these three changes and the bad law will transform into a good law. The question is, Rahul, can the government gulp down its stupidity and ego and do it?
Well,
Can I come
viewers,
in?
the matter now, yeah, 1 second. The matter now is, of course, in court. Now, viewers, the upper castes are victims of social justice overreach via this particular set of regulations. And they are the victims of woke vengeance. Let me just be very, very clear. Victims of woke vengeance. Mr. Mondol, you wanted to come in, and I want to bring in Rajat to break down
first-
how this would have divided society. And after that, viewers, we're going to be speaking to Vishnu Shankar Jain, the man in the middle of your screens, and Jai Sai Deepak, who are at the forefront of the legal arguments against this particular matter. Yes, Professor Mondol.
First of all, Mr. Shiv Shankar, there is no such concept called upper caste and lower caste. These are all constructed in the society to keep up the hegemony of a particular group of people. Please say, quote unquote, so-called upper caste. There lies the problem. This country believes in caste. I would not say that my good friend Ranganathan comes from a particular Brahminical family. I won't say, because I believe in cohesion. But the fact remains, in this country, the Dalits, SCs, OBCs, minorities, marginalized, and now the weaker section, I repeat, this is not about only SC, STs, OBCs. I don't know for why you are bringing it up like a caste legislation. This also talks about weaker section, means EWS, who largely come from a different category of people. It largely talks about the people who get their job through quota. Even quota is a condemned idea in this country. There lies the problem. And that's why I say,
quota in this country is based on identity, not economic circumstance. So these people who are talking about
this country, quota itself is a condemned identity in this
Sir,
country.
the problem is that people who today talk about
Then please
social justice.
abolish quota.
Professor,
Then please abolish quota.
I would
abolish
go
quota.
in for
And
economic.
I would
go in for economic rationale.
That's
sir.
the direction that you are heading towards.
We will go towards.
This is the
1
presage.
second, calm down.
This is presage.
Why do you go
this
off
is
on
a presage to abolish quotas, reservation system. I tell you this.
Why do you go off on
This
a
is the
tangent?
presage.
Sir? Okay, so you guys want to perpetuate. Because simple question. People
This is a
say that the
presage
Hindu
to
faith.
abolish
No, 1
reservation
second.
for
People
social
say that the
justice.
Hindu tradition, Hindu society is addled by quotas, and therefore they should convert.
It's not
and
about,
move out.
it's
1
only
second,
about Hindu
and move
societies.
out and become either Muslims or Christians or become Buddhists. But yours, they still want that quota. Why do they keep wanting that quota? If it's not about identity, then why do you want to keep? Why do you want to keep perpetuating that quota? 1 second,
That's the real
Rajat
point.
explain to this gentleman.
That's the real point.
The repercussions of the argument he's extended, because I'm going to go straight across in 3-4 minutes to Jai Sai Deepak and Vishnu Shankar Jain. Yes, Rajat Sethi. I can't hear you, sir. I think you're on mute.
Real problem.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, so Rahul, I think this is where the apprehensions that were brought out earlier by the activists who were on the street is being eluded by Mr. Manojit here. He himself is the symbol of everything that can potentially, all the arguments that that the so-called activists on the ground were presenting. My fundamental problem here was, and I think Supreme Court was very clear in actually pointing it out in no uncertain terms, that the language was the issue. It was patently unconstitutional, and there were no doubts about it. And I believe it was rightly struck down, and I believe it will go back to the drawing books. But if social cohesion and social justice remains paramount, you need to have a language which is neutral to caste. You need to have a language which is, which obliterates the differences that are there, brings about equity and equality in every possible way. This is where I think Manojit's core argument
Can you
fails,
very
because
quickly
your
simplify
agenda-
how this should have acted practically? Very quickly, sir.
Well, I believe that I have been hearing stories from so many students in the universities that this would this would have, had the Supreme Court not intervened here, this would have really unraveled politically very negatively
viewers,
for
look,
the
don't
ruling
hedge,
party
don't
also.
hedge. What it would have meant, let me fill in the blanks. Come on, let's grow a spine, for God's sakes, on national TV. What would have happened, viewers, is very simply this. There would have been reverse discrimination. Someone might, a professor or a student, fellow cohort, might want to point out something about somebody who happens to be, not because, viewers, but happens to be from a lower caste or community. That person would use these laws to say, I'm being prosecuted because I am from a certain denomination or a certain lower caste. And guess what, viewers? The body that would be instituted to oversee this charge would be packed by individuals from the community from which the complainant belongs and not from the community, viewers, of the person who is being accused. Now that in itself constitutes, viewers, an injustice, an unequal justice. Secondly, most importantly, if that complaint happens to be false, there is no recompense. The person from the upper caste cannot take action. If it happens to be a Muslim who is the accuser and is a false accuser, nothing can happen because they are permanently condemned as victims. It immediately, viewers, opens the doors for suspicion, inter-community suspicion. I just leave it because I want to get in the expert view